Hi, I'm Kirby Allison, and in today's video, I'm excited to be here in London on Savile Row with Tony Gaziano of Gaziano and Girling. Tony, hey, thank you so much for joining me.
Yes, pleasure.
It's such a privilege to be back here, and we're going to be commissioning my first pair of shoes. And so, as part of our Lastmaker series, where we film bespoke Lastmakers taking measurements, we're going to film the process of you kind of kicking this off. So that's pretty exciting. So I guess one of the great things about having the shop here on Savile Row is you've got a place to do bespoke measurements here in London.
Yeah.
But also, during the trunk shows, traveling around, you can do bespoke measurements as well. Yes.
Yeah. No, it's London's a great base for. It's such an international city that most people come here anyway. But occasionally we travel around the world to Asia, to America. And we take bespoke measurements in wherever we stay, whether it be a hotel suite or another shop, and then we follow up probably 6 months later with the fittings.
Yeah.
So,
and I guess what's exciting about now that you're stepping back into bespoke is that you're taking the measurements and doing the last making, and so that kind of has that chain of custody, if you will.
Yeah. It keeps everything tight as well. Bespoke is very important to, that, when you meet the customer, you understand the customer, you extract the information out of the customer that you need to find out what type of fit he likes, and what he's looking for. So that when I'm making the last, I've got all that information in my brain. So it becomes very disjointed if one guy takes a measure and then another guy makes the last. So, it's we've really kind of gone back to square one.
Yeah.
And,
it's full circle.
Yeah, it's the best way to work. Okay, so what I'm going to get you to do is if you can stand up for me, please. Place this foot right in the center of that section. Perfect. And this one here. Just going to roll your trouser up so it doesn't get in the way of the measure. So first thing I normally ask is if there are any sensitive areas of the foot that you experience while you're...
my insteps, are normally pretty pronounced.
Yep.
And that's, at the end of the day, what produces the most discomfort.
Right, okay. And that is because typically you like to tie your shoelace is quite tight, or a certain amount gap on the instep of the Oxford, or generally?
Just generally.
Okay, cool. So what we're going to do now is obviously I'm going to take an outline of the foot to get the outside area, and then we'll take a certain circumference measures throughout the foot, measure the depth of the toes and the joints to make sure that we can get that profile right. And just generally kind of study the feet. I mean, I can see straight away that you've got a difference in shape between your left and right feet. So when that happens, we kind of, we incorporate that into the last making, but we try our best to make the end shoe look symmetrical so that you can't see it, even though it's there.
Yeah, so as part of the challenge of last making is making beautiful shoes, not feet-shaped shoes.
Yeah, I mean, you always have to make a pair of shoes, but you don't always get a pair of feet.
Yeah.
So now if you can keep yourself evenly balanced, try and refrain from looking one side or the other because it distributes the weight slightly differently. And we can start. So this part of the measurement creates an outside boundary which will build the last two. So that when I'm creating the outline shape of the last, it will be to this exact line. It's important to know as well when, to extract, what kind of shoes the customer might have in the future as well, because whether you're having boots or whether you're having slip-on loafers, it might mean taking a few different measurements, yeah. Okay, so that line I'm drawing in now is basically the arch area. So it will tell me how deep the arch is, how flat the arch is, or how high the arch is, and how much support that I really need to give you around this area of the foot. So this is taking the foot length measurement. And typically in Lastmaking there is 3 length measurements. There's foot length, shoe size, and last length. Shoe size is and foot length is you know, there's no variation there, but with last length, depending on the foot, you can kind of make it last longer or shorter depending on what type of shoe that you're making.
What size am I?
So you are around about size 9, 9.5. Yeah, you should take about a 9.5 UK size. Okay. Okay. So we mark the areas, some of the features of the foot as well, just taking notes down, kind of making a note that you're quite shallow around the outside of the joint of your foot. And then we take some height measurements of features like the toes. And then we take the height of the joint as well. And finally, we take an instep height as well, which is roughly around where the instep bone is, which you can feel here. Mm-hmm. That's the area normally on an instep that causes the most pain.
Yeah, it's quite sensitive with me. Bony.
Okay. So now we'll take measurements around the circumference of your foot. One will be from the joint to the small toe. One will be across the widest part, which is the joint measurement. Then we take a lower instep, which is roughly the area where the bottom of an Oxford lacing would come. We take an extra measurement there where the instep bone is to make sure that we get that measurement right. And then finally up to the top of the instep, which is normally where the top of an Oxford lacing would come. Then we take what's called a short heel measure, which will be from that top measure round the back of the heel and back to the instep measurement. We take an ankle measurement from the same point round to where the top of the back would come, and there, and we do the same on both feet.
And are all your measurements done fully weighted, standing?
All the measurements are done fully weighted standing because basically, you need to maximize the amount that the feet spread. Mm-hmm. So if you make the shoe to that standing measurement, it's always going to be comfortable when you're standing or sitting. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you use a sitting measurement when you're standing, the shoe's going to end up tight. So if you can keep your heel and just lift the front of your foot up and sit and down again. So I always mark where the tape goes so that when I go back to the last, I can put the tape in exactly the same place. Okay, and just lift again, please. And that's the joint measurement. And again, please. And lower instep measurement. And again, please. And this is the measurement where that instep bone would be. Okay, and then the high instep measurement. And then we go round the back of the heel. Just lift your heel up for me. Circle round the cup and put your foot down to where the top of the lacing would be.
What's that measurement for?
So this measurement, this is what really kind of keeps the back of the shoe flush to your foot. So that's quite, especially on a loafer, it's quite important to make sure that there's no gap at the back and there's no slippage when you're walking in the shoes. And then we'll just do one round the ankle as well. Okay, and while we're here, we just take a measurement of the height of the ankle bone, because sometimes people have quite low ankle bones and they sit on the top of the top line of a shoe, which can be quite uncomfortable. And that just allows us to cut the pattern underneath where that bone is.
And it's an asymmetric pattern?
Yeah.
So it's lower on the outside than it is on the inside?
Yeah. Okay. So now if you can just step off for a second.
Yep.
Okay, I'm just going to spin the measure around. Okay, and then if you can step back on. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly trace around the foot again. Okay. Now this gives me some idea of the contours of your foot, so it helps me get the depth right around this area when I'm making the last.
So that's about distribution of volume?
Yeah, it's quite, you know, sometimes it's quite difficult to read how much depth you need to put on a last. So it just kind of helps with that, and that will prevent unnecessary excess creasing and things like that.
Because excessive creasing is really too much volume in the shoe, right?
That's right, yeah. And actually, you know, when customers complain that the shoe's hurting them in this area, it's usually caused by too much volume and the creasing back into the foot rather than not enough. So okay. Okay. So what else we do is we actually do, to get this ankle curve right on the shoe, we do the same thing. So around about where the top of the back of the shoe comes in, we just do this and it gives me the correct shape around here. Okay, so all right. One last thing I need to do, if you can just step off for me again. And what we're going to do is this way. I'll do it that way. Okay. And put your feet together. And that's it. And a little bit more. That's it. Perfect.
Like that?
Yep. Okay. So this really allows me to concentrate on the areas of the contours of the back heel curve and what depth and shape this area of your foot is. Okay, so that's pretty much the measurement complete.
Wow, so that's great. I mean, I've gone through a lot of these, Tony, and I have to say this is really quite detailed compared to a lot of the other bespoke measurements.
Oh, right, okay.
I've gone through.
Yeah, I'm not fully familiar with what other people do, but really all I really concentrate on is giving myself enough details of all the different areas of the foot so that I'm not guessing when I get back to the workshop.
Yeah.
So other than the kind of underfoot, which that gives me a little bit of information there, everything is covered. So
you'll take these measurements and, you'll start with your, block of wood, the last.
Yes.
And, you're using these measurements, but you're also, it's sculpture, right? That's where your design eye comes in. So taking into account like the toe shape that the client selects, you're really sculpting a beautiful shoe that takes into account these measurements.
That's correct. Every measure is different with every customer. There's not a singular formula to all the individual measures. It's a very kind of, you innovate as you kind of go along, if you know what I mean. Especially when you're trying to mix aesthetics with fit. Mm-hmm. So normally what I do is concentrate purely on making the last of the fit first into the dimensions and get everything right. And then I look at the toe shape and the aesthetics as a completely separate thing. How can I, build certain shapes and silhouettes into this that give the customer what he wants from the shoe. So
will you do that by taking away and building up after you've done the measurements?
Normally, sometimes it's building up, but
okay.
The skill is by taking away and building up in a way that it doesn't affect the fit of the shoe.
Fit of the shoe. Yeah, that's interesting. What do you think the most challenging part of the last making is?
It's making a pair.
Really?
Yeah, it's really, you can make half a pair of last and you can look in it and admire. And then, when you look at the other half, it's actually kind of getting that to kind of match up to the same shape and get it right down. One of my old bosses used to turn around to me and say, just leave the last alone because you're just going to end up with a pile of sawdust on the floor. Mm-hmm. Because I was just trying to just perfect it so much as a pair. Mm-hmm. But there probably is no such thing as a perfect pair. It's as close as you can get.
As close as you can get, yeah. Yeah, that's great. And then, what is like the most fulfilling part of this for you? As a true artisan, what are you left with at the end of the process that just really intrinsically is fulfilling?
I always get a buzz out of creating the shoe as we go along, but I think the most fulfilling part is actually fitting the shoe on the customer, and he turns around and says, "Well, I don't know what to say." That's the best sign. Yeah. So that kind of relieves that little bit of anxiety you have every time you fit somebody's feet.
Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how beautiful the shoes are if they're uncomfortable. They have to be comfortable and fit, right?
Exactly. But as well, everybody has different priorities. Some people do come to us and say they're prepared to forego a little bit of kind of pinching and things in order to kind of get the shape. Mm-hmm. But I try not to do that too much because inevitably, a few years down the line, those shoes will come back and they will be altered. So, we try to get the fit. Really what I want to do is when you stand in those finished pair of bespoke is for the fit to feel 100%. And then, but the things that you can't anticipate is when the customer wears them for a 12-hour day, he starts walking in them. That's when we kind of expect a little bit, maybe a few tweaks and that to kind of come back to us. And then we obviously service that by correcting those mistakes.
Yeah. So and that's part of the evolution of kind of the client journey, if you will.
Exactly.
But the first pair is perfect, it's comfortable.
Yeah.
It's technically, flawless.
Yeah.
And there might be some tweaking, but it's very kind of minor. And
normally that can to do with different leathers that you choose or how the leather has reacted to kind of molding on the last, different things like that, which probably have nothing to do with the last, but are generally, whether it's bespoke or ready to wear, leather has a certain set stiffness about it. It does need to break down. The customer does need to wear them 4 or 5 times to kind of
it stretches a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So that's great. Well, I couldn't be more excited, Tony. So I guess the next step is you taking this back to the workshop and creating some sawdust, carving up a nice wooden last, and then building, I guess, a first fitting.
Yeah. Let's hope I don't end up with a pile of sawdust with yours.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
That's all right.
I mean, it's a true honor.
No, it's a
be
pleasure.
able to have you make a pair of shoes for me.
Yeah.
And I couldn't be more excited. You have to sign the last. I'm going to have to get a picture with it when we're done.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, pleasure. Nice to see you.
Wow. So there we are. I mean, this is really the genesis of the bespoke process, or those bespoke measurements. And I really can't overstate how important they are and how important that they are done well. And I have to say, it's really encouraging to see the amount of detail, the attention to detail that Tony takes in those measurements. I have full confidence that these are going to be some of the best fitting shoes I own. And then also to have Tony Gaziano. I mean, Tony and Dean, really are legends in modern shoemaking. What they did with Gaziano and Girling really was on the cutting edge, back in the early 2000s, whenever they broke away from the establishment, established Gaziano and Girling, and really updated and energized that classic English aesthetic. Of course, Tony, properly trained, a bespoke Lastmaker. His talent really was in his eye for design, creating those beautiful silhouettes. A 3D printer could throw out a simple, foot-shaped shoe, but to really hit on something that is inspiring, that is beautiful, and really speaks of sculpture, takes the eye of a true artisan, and there's no question that Tony's going to be able to do that. So I couldn't be more excited to have him back in the business, in the bespoke workshop, doing bespoke Lastmaking for bespoke clients, and to have my name in the book with him making a pair of shoes is really exciting. I hope you enjoyed this video. Of course, let us know what you think in the comments below. Thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and check out the links in the description of this video for more great videos that we have with Gaziano and Girling. Of course, I'm Kirby Allison, and I love to help the well-dressed acquire and care for their wardrobes while exploring the world of quality, craftsmanship, and tradition. Thanks for watching.